Hello and welcome to the Radiate Wellness Podcast with your host, metaphysician, Reiki master, and hypnotherapist, Christy Clemens Hoffman. Each week, we will discover teachings, tips, and tools to radiate your best life ever with practitioners, authors, and luminaries to help you on your path. Wellness, joy, peace, abundance. What do you want to radiate?
Welcome back to the Radiate Wellness Podcast. Today we radiate clarity with Elisabeth Grace, astrologer from Queens, New York, right? Queens?
Well, I lived in Queens. Yes, I live in Queens, in Forest Hills, home of the Ramones.
Oh, I love it. Yes. Much hippier than Kansas City.
I don't know. There are a lot of really cool people in Kansas City, in my opinion. You are in Kansas City. There's a Jane Austen Society in Kansas City. I actually spoke to them once about the horoscope of Jane Austen. So you are the second. Yes.
We need to talk, Elizabeth.
So that is so progressive and hip and happening that the Jane Austen Society of Kansas City would have an astrologer come in and they wanted to know, tell us about Jane Austen's horoscope. And we were able to discover things that, because astrology can see what's going on, even though we may have lost many of Jane Austen's letters and such, we know what was going on when certain events happened. So you are this is the second connection I've had with someone in Kansas City. So I'm thrilled to be back.
Oh, that's lovely. And I love Jane Austen. We'll have to talk.
Yes.
Well, what struck me about you, and I have to say that Anthony Pico was very recently on the Radiate Wellness Podcast to talk about astrology, of course. And we got to talking, and I had asked him on the show if he looked at current events and people in the news, et cetera. He said, no, I don't, but I know somebody who does. He said that you had actually been a reporter, and I saw from your website that you had that background.
Well, I wasn't I am a reporter of astrology and the astonishing synchronicity of astrology in the news. That is my beat. Okay.
Yeah.
And I have worked in news, not as someone who reported the stories. I was the person who promoted the stories that we were going to see at the 11 o'clock hour.
So you were in the news.
I was in the news, but I was not the reporter person because there's not much use in news for astrology, unfortunately, in the way it is done now. So I went off and created my own beat reporting on the synchronicity of astrology and the news, because what happened was when I would have, the top stories coming in, you'd spend all day, running around, getting your clips together to craft a little promo for the top story that's going to be the top of the 11 o'clock hour. And I was also writing a forecast about daily planetary patterns. And I began noticing that there was a synchronicity. The stories that were driving the headlines on the front page of the papers were reflecting the potential of the planetary patterns that day. And, when you first start learning about astrology, and if you're a novice, if you just start, you learn your sun sign, maybe you learn your rising sign, whatever. You focus on your own chart, and you could spend years just, doing your horoscope and your boyfriend's horoscope and your sister's horoscope or whatever. You don't realize that astrology is expressed in everything, every moment in time. Like we were talking about at the top as we were starting this talk, where there was some confusion about the time that we were supposed to meet. And, and I said, I did a horoscope for the moment that we were supposed to meet, and noticed that there was a pattern in that chart that suggested that there's probably going to be some confusion over where we are. And that is exactly what happened.
Oh, and it was all on me.
whoever it was, it doesn't matter. Cause like I may not have been terribly focused on things either. Cause I said I was going to come in at 4:15 my time, which is 3:15 your time. Right. And I got distracted. I was doing something else. And then I came back and you're like, where are you? Are you coming in? Is this still a good time? Which you picked up on because my focus had gone elsewhere. Instead of me being there on the quarter hour, I was delayed and I was distracted, which is exactly what we saw. Well, I saw it because I did the horoscope. I'm like, yeah, this is a moment of potential bewilderment.
Right. Isn't that great? So what else came up? Yeah, what else came up in this moment?
I'm pausing because there was a siren going down because I live in New York. So I don't know if you picked up on it. So tell me, I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Sure. So what else came up in that chart for today?
So, well, let me look at it because what I saw was, there's certain things in a horoscope that the eye is immediately drawn to. So the first, I look at what we call the angles of the horoscope, the compass points, and immediately saw, here's this pattern that's kind of fuzzy, but right behind it is expansion, a grand set, a prominence about what we're going to talk about. So I think what we're going to talk about today and people receiving this information today are probably it's going to make an impression. It's going to capture their attention according to this horoscope. It is going to expand their horizons. Because I'm now taking in the rest of the horoscope. If you want me to tell you what I'm seeing in jargon, I will, but I don't know if that would be helpful to your audience.
Yeah. And, we have an astrologer with Radiate Wellness and full disclosure, that's my aunt who is an astrologer. And so I've been bathed in astrology ever since I was a kid. And do I understand any of it? And the jargon? No, I don't.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I'll refrain from sharing the jargon, but suffice it to say, that's what we see. We see broadening horizons, international reach, a need to express a righteous opinionation and have an enthusiastic and joyful debate.
Love it. No, that sounds perfect.
Yeah.
And you've got this great kind of blog on your website just called The Forecast. And so like what's up for the week ahead? What energies can we expect? Now, of course, we're recording today on Thursday, October 27th, my brother's birthday, woot woot. And woot woot. And this will be appearing 1 week after the midterm elections. So, I know.
Wow.
Interesting, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, today's news is going to be a little bit out of date by the time this comes around, but, there's always stuff going on. It looks like there is an eclipse right around the 8th.
Yes. Well, we had one. We just had one. What day is it? Remembering what day it is. I have to remember what day it is, first of all, because time just flies. We had one on Tuesday. We had one on Tuesday. So we had a new moon and a partial solar eclipse. So this is eclipse season. So they're usually, we have them twice a year and they usually come in pairs. So we had a solar eclipse on the new moon on Tuesday, October 25th. In Scorpio. Everyone can run screaming down the hall. And then we have a lunar eclipse, which is a total lunar eclipse, on November 8th in Taurus. The moon will be in Taurus. It will be opposing the Scorpio moon. So this is about values. It's like, what is mine versus what is ours? What's important to me? What do I have to share with other people? Possessions. Things like that. And it's a pretty wild eclipse. It's a pretty wild eclipse in that there's an electric energy to this eclipse. When you look at, there's certain planets that symbolize, like I see astrology as a language. right? I don't think there's anything up there on Pluto that's pushing people around.
Yeah.
Okay. Astrology is a language. For some reason, every civilization under the stars has looked up at the stars and the planets and seen patterns and given these things above meaning. And if you think about languages, we have so many, right? Lots of languages. All of them are valid.
Yeah.
English is a valid language. Japanese is a valid language. They may be structured differently. They may be focused on certain things that reflect the consciousness and life experience of the people who've created the language. So if you want to have a conversation, a deep conversation about snow, are you going to learn Inuit or Swahili?
Right. Exactly.
So if you want to have a deep conversation about human experience through space and time, you might want to learn astrology or talk to somebody who speaks astrology who can translate it to you in plain English.
I love that. I work in analogies. And so that's a fantastic analogy because it does make a lot of sense, right? Somebody who understands that type of thing. And, you know, it does apply. And that's why I really like what you do and what you offer is looking at the current events, looking at the global scale rather than the personal horoscope, which you do too, right?
I do too. Yes.
Of course you do. But taking a bigger step back and looking at the collective astrology, because my God, yeah, you can work with the individuals and you do, of course, but it's what we do with each other that really shapes our lives, how we co-create, right? So I think that's fascinating. So, of course, this is going to be coming out just 1 week after the midterms, and I had to go check my schedule and make sure that I'm saying the truth. It'll come out the week after the midterms. So, looking ahead, what kind of predictions do you have for that?
I've laughed. You know, this is the challenge for astrologers.
I know.
Why is it so important? Why is the value of astrology on being able to see what's going to happen and not on other things other tools that astrology offers, such as who are you and what do you really need in order to be happy?
Okay, that's a good point. Good point. So I'm wondering, just in terms of, you know, we've had so much political violence, people being so at odds, like is there a certain climate that we can look at as far as what the fallout is going to be?
Well, first of all, what astrology does suggest for those who study it is that the tension that we've been experiencing and the polarization and the feeling of being stuck, like which way is going to go and why is everything so close and why are all the polls that we're reading, you're talking about, because you're asking me about the midterms, why are all the polls in conflict with each other? What are we supposed to believe? All of this that's happening now is an accurate reflection of the potential of the patterns. You know, astrologers have this expression, as above, so below. We love to say this, right? Whatever's going up there, which somehow is expressing symbolism that humans gave to it, you know, the symbolism of Pluto or Saturn or whatever that means, that seems to have come out of human perspective that define these things as such. And therefore they have meaning in our experience because we've given it that meaning. It's a really weird dance. There's so much we don't know. But right now, astrologers writing about this time period years ago anticipated that this year, and 2020 was another one, we anticipated that this is where we were going to be, that we were going to be feeling as if we were at loggerheads, stubborn perspectives, neither one is giving an inch, with all of this bewildering spin. How do we know what to believe? Who is telling the truth?
Right. Absolutely.
Okay. So, where we are sitting on October 27th, I'm telling my audience, don't believe the polls. Mm-hmm. First of all, they're all contradicting each other. Don't believe the polls. That's the first thing. The second thing is, there are going to be some surprises because nobody really knows. If I had to go on record, and we'll see, if I had to go on record, my sense is that even with this tension of there's this disruptive energy in the patterns and this eclipse, and there's also something that is clinging so stubbornly to preserving its position that we're not likely to see a major change in the balance of power.
I would believe that. I just, my field is energy, and just from the energy of everybody being so staunch in their position at loggerheads, not believing anything that comes from somebody who has opposing viewpoints. Mm-hmm. There's no foreseeable way right now to get past that energy.
Right. Yeah. So, you're like, oh, you're an astrologer. You predict things. What do you think's going to happen?
Things. I'm like looking at the forecast.
No, I'm like, let me tell you about how I helped a client, do something they were afraid to do because the astrology in her horoscope was, encouraging her to take this risk, and she did it, and how happy and grateful she was. I mean, that's meaningful too.
Right. It is. Super meaningful.
Yeah.
Right.
Or how they understood their children better or their partner better because they got to know their partner or child's horoscope, and they were able to be a better partner or parent to their loved ones because they suddenly realized through astrology they could appreciate the behavior and the needs of the people they cared about.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so, what strikes me about the additional work that you bring to the table on astrology is that you apply that kind of microcosm to
the world
above, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You apply it, to the world below, or so below. You also apply it to the world, to all that's above.
Right.
Like you've got a big lens on that.
I have a big lens. And so here's one thing that watching these cycles and observing these cycles, here's one thing that's reassuring to people who are going, what is going on? This is crazy. The whole world is falling apart. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's absolutely accurate. The world is falling apart.
Or at least that's how it feels.
Right? Yeah, it feels, and it is accurate. Right. You're absolutely right.
Economies are tanking. We've got war. We've got dictators. We have this clash of authoritarianism, and if you go back and read my forecast from 2015, and I'm basing my writing back then on what I've learned from other astrologers who are older than I am, with more, even more experience than I had at that time. Right. This conflict between democratic, power to the people versus my way or the highway authoritarianism. This was anticipated at this time because the planetary patterns
the symbolism that these patterns, that the humans have given these patterns, that's what's there. The extremes of control that came down in 2020, because of COVID, all of this stuff, it all made sense. Right. And it was anticipated. So, but getting back to, so my point about how to be in this absolutely bewildering time without losing your sanity, is to appreciate that this is a cycle. You're not 500 years old, but within the past 500 years, even within the past 250 years that America's almost been around, we have been in similar places before.
Something that I've been thinking about, that it's been like this, if not worse.
Yeah. I mean, there's one coping strategy I'm always talking about, historian Heather Cox Richardson. Do you know her work?
Love her. She's brilliant.
Right. She's brilliant. And what she does is, this is going on. This is what happened today. There was a crisis of leadership, and it looks, whatever it is, whatever the deal is. And she goes, but back in 1856, blah, 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 blah happened. And yes, it almost looked like we were going to just go completely kaplooey, but we didn't. And then what I do is, she writes about the period in history, and I go and I look at the planetary patterns and go, that's exactly what we're dealing with today. One of the big planetary patterns that the United States is wrestling with, struggling with right now, that's being keenly felt all through this year, this energy of breakdown and transformation, corruption exposed and rot in all areas of government. It's like, the metaphor is, or the analogy is, and this is a quote from a book called Illusions by Richard Bach I read this book, I read this when I was 18. Okay. What the caterpillar calls the end of the world, the master calls a butterfly. Yeah. Okay. But that caterpillar has to it's gone. It comes out, but it has to go through some serious tectonic,
it completely breaks down.
Completely breaks down. And then at the end of the day, it's this beautiful, light, gorgeous thing. Not that caterpillars aren't cute, but it's at a higher level. So the United States has that in its little cosmic calendar for this year, and having to process that next year. But we were in a similar space in the early 80s and in the early 30s and around 1850-ish, thereabouts. And it was the energy of breakdown and transformation and power and resources and who was going to control it. And if you look back to the early 80s, for example, what did that bring into the table? Jimmy Carter and his solar panels on the White House were shown the door. And Ronald Reagan and his trickle-down economics came in. And there was a shift in how resources and power was, that's a turning point. If you read the work of historians like Heather Cox Richardson, she will say this was a turning point. This was a defining moment where the strategy of who was going to have the power and the resources went from sharing it among, smaller people to all the way up to the top. And in the early 30s, Franklin Roosevelt came in and said, I got a new deal, guys. And that was a turning point where we had all of this investment in our infrastructure and programs like Social Security and Medicare that evolved up through the 60s. So where we are now is at yet another critical point, because the patterns, the cycles are repeating. Mm-hmm. Okay. It's not simple. It's like, it's just and so we've dealt with this energy before.
Right. True. Now, what worries me a little bit is, like, in the early 30s, then that led to the rise of Nazism and Hitler and...
Yeah, well, see, you had that same conflict. Are we going to have a democracy, or are we going to have one person in charge telling everybody they don't like, what they can and cannot do?
Right.
And so, and then in the mid 60s, we had the same massive revolutions that were coming. China went off and did its own, what became of that. And then, so here we are again, where we're going, what are these authoritarian governments propping up? Well, the patterns, this stuff, we obviously haven't finished this exercise yet.
Right. That's just, yeah, right. And that worries me. And of course, you mentioned the 1850s, and we all know what happened there in the United States.
Right. So, the Civil War and the Reconstruction. I always want to make sure I get that word correct. The Reconstruction. And then how, in the South, the idea that, wait a minute, what is this equal bit? And they suppressed the freed slaves and said, no, we don't want to invest in these social programs because that felt like you're taking something away from us, and we don't want to invest in the whole community, whatever. What I'm saying is I'm paraphrasing the way Heather Cox Richardson, who's written books about this, explains what happened at that time.
Exactly.
Yes.
Okay, so we're in this pattern, this cycle right now.
Yes, because the United States has a horoscope. Right?
Of course.
So the United States has a horoscope, and so the horoscope of the United States is uniquely affected by this. And then there are the other patterns that are affecting everybody. So you see it in the world as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, let me ask you, when you do the chart of the United States, do you base it on July 4th? Do you base it on the beginning of the Revolutionary War? Do you base it on when the Constitution was written?
Excellent question. Oh my God. This is the eternal debate at the bar at any astrological conference, because we even have fist fights over because unfortunately, they didn't have video cameras when the Declaration of Independence was signed. So there is argument as to, well, is 5:10 really? Is 5:10 p.m. on July 4th, 1776 in Philadelphia really the date, the absolute time that the Declaration of Independence was completely signed, which was sort of the statement of the nation? Then, of course, the Constitution didn't come around until
1787.
Right. And then, which is so interesting, because I'm pretty sure, if memory serves, I think it was September, and I can't remember where the moon was, but it's just so interesting that in order to form a more perfect union, and the sun was in Virgo. So of course they were trying to get it right. They were trying to make better. If how the energy of Virgo is here to make something correct, to improve upon it, to perfect something. And so the Constitution came out of the fact that, hey, we had this really great idea in 1776 as to how and then of course we won the war, but it's not working. So we have to fix it. And that's why we had the Constitution.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when do you pinpoint the birth of this country?
So there is something called the Sibley chart. Ebenezer Sibley was a British astrologer who rectified, in other words, tested the horoscope, and in his esteemed opinion, determined that 5:10 p.m. was the appropriate time for the horoscope of the United States, which gave our country on July 4th in 1776,
right,
which gave our nation a Sagittarius ascendant, very broad. Everything is big and expansive and a little clumsy, and we're welcoming all these, all these philosophies and religion. Everything is tolerated here. So many astrologers use that chart as a timing tool, but there is debate over it. There are other astrologers who believe that the most workable chart for the United States is at 2 a.m, 2:13 or something in the morning, because they feel that that is a better expression of the United States. So here's the thing, before people are going, aha, astrology, it's bunk. It means nothing because you can't even agree on anything. But you know what? Languages, they're all valid.
Right.
Right? So I'm a Western astrologer. The way I look at a horoscope, the way I calculate a horoscope may be a little different than how, somebody who uses a Vedic astrologer, or who's using a different zodiac. They're using the position of the planets that's tied to the sidereal, the position of the stars, which is shifted. Whereas,
right.
So it's like, but it's a language, and for some bizarre reason, they all work, and you will find pockets of brilliance according to the focus of those who speak that particular language.
Did you know that Radiate Wellness is more than just a podcast? That's right. We're also a comprehensive, holistic wellness practice. Find out about our services, practitioners, and upcoming events at radiatewellnesscommunity.com. While you're there, visit our podcast page to read more about our great guests and even donate to the podcast. If you like our podcast, you can help in other ways as well, like subscribe or follow us wherever you're listening right now. Tell a friend, a family member, or a coworker about the great content you find here. And if you wouldn't mind, please give us a thumbs up, a 5-star rating, or a positive review. Sounds like a small thing, but it really helps. You might like to know about our Facebook communities while we're at it. We have a free community, the Radiate Wellness Community, on Facebook for news and great free content. Our subscribers group is Radiate You, as in the letter U, but also, well, you. There you'll find curated replays of past classes, guest interviews, and more. And now, back to our podcast and back to our guest.
For example, like I do a podcast called Off the Charts, a stellar newscast, and Whitney Fishburne is an astrologer who is a real live journalist. She is an actual journalist. I just promoted the news, but she actually wrote the news. And she has learned different systems of astrology, and her preferred way to use astrology is something called whole sign astrology. Mm-hmm. Okay, just that's the technical term. And she has a different way of looking at the time, place, and date of the birth. And she will pull pieces of information that I wouldn't necessarily pick up on right away, because her language, her approach to that horoscope, she'll pick up on, I think, a more soulful. She's really focused on that. Her ability to read that chart through that language gives her that particular insight that when I'm looking at a horoscope through the lens of modern psychological astrology or modern humanistic astrology, which interprets the planets in the horoscope as symbols of needs. Mm-hmm. Like, what does somebody need? Well, if you look at the horoscope, an astrologer who knows how to do that can translate those symbols into an accurate assessment of needs. And when you know what somebody needs, you can anticipate what they're likely to do under certain pressures. And you also, if you know what they need,
right,
you know what they're likely to do. Like, for example, President Biden, his moon is in Taurus. All right. The moon, in the language of astrology, well, this isn't the language of astrology. This is real life. You look up at the sky from our perspective on planet Earth, and the sun and the moon are the same size. We have eclipses. This is amazing. This is amazing. Think about this. The sun is ginormous and zillions of miles away. The moon is tiny and close.
Really, yeah, relative.
But they're the same size.
Right.
And they can get in each other's So going back to the astrologers, what we love to say, as above, so below, these planets, these celestial bodies are symbols. Humans have given them meaning. We better give equal weight to the sun and the moon in the horoscope. And you can't really understand the sun by looking directly at it. You will go blind. Right?
Right.
How can you comfortably handle the light of the sun? And everybody's so proud of their sun sign, right? Oh, I'm a Taurus, I'm an Aries, my sun sign. Okay. But where's your moon? Because the moon is going to reflect the light of the sun in a way that is soft and, bearable. Are you following me?
Yes.
So I'm going back to Joe Biden here. I'm going to tell you how you know what he's going to do. Okay. So to understand, so in a horoscope, the sun and the moon are working together. You understand what somebody really needs to do, what's driving them, their reigning need by the moon as it reflects the fuel they bring to the table, which is the sun. So Joe Biden is a Scorpio. That's his fuel. He's here to experience life in great heights and depths and consolidate resources for power. But his moon is in Taurus.
Interesting.
Okay.
Keeping him grounded.
Keeping him earthbound. Yes. Yeah. And if you look at the moon in terms of what does it need? It needs material, comfort, and security and stability. And this is reflected in everything Joe Biden does.
Yeah.
Build back better. He needs to establish material comfort and security. You may not agree with his politics. You may think he's a doofus, whatever, but that is what he needs. The best he can, he needs to preserve the status quo in a way that is comfortable and secure.
Interesting. Now, have you happened to look at Vladimir Putin?
I have looked at Vladimir Putin. We do not know if we have an accurate birth time for him. And there is some debate as to whether or not we even have an accurate birth date. So we don't know. But of what we're using, because he just had a birthday. He's a Libra. I think he's got moon in Gemini. I think he has moon in Gemini. Let me just quickly look that up.
Sure.
He's got moon in Gemini, which says, he needs to be, but I don't want to make I want to make sure I don't.
Because, here is somebody who's completely invading another country.
Yeah.
What does he need? What does he need? Back to your language.
What does he need? Yeah. Why is he doing this? What does he need? Well, so the time and it's not, we don't know. It could not be accurate, but we're using it and it's workable. Okay. We call it a workable birth time. He's sun sign Libra with all of this energy for, equality, fairness in relationship, such as it is. However, it's tempered by strict discipline. There is a squeeze and a need for control on this energy. You see that. He's also, the way he needs to think, we can see that he may be, he could be visionary, that would be nice, but he also may be off in some rose-colored foggy thing and may not be getting the clear picture, right?
Right.
His moon is in the horoscope that most astrologers use, his moon is in Gemini, so what he needs is to be the smartest, most intensely entertaining and informed person in the room.
Interesting. Very interesting.
He needs, and that kind of runs wild. And in this horoscope, what we see at the very top of the chart because the compass points, if you're looking at the horoscope, what we would call the compass points, the north, south, east, and west positions, anytime you see something on a compass point, it's accentuated. And what he has at the top of his horoscope is ruthless power.
That explains a lot.
It explains a lot. It explains a lot.
Because I think most of the world is sitting here going, what are you hoping to accomplish?
I don't know.
Right. You know, the rest of us are just sitting here going, why?
I know. Why? Why are you being, why? You know, what? Did you have I mean, you know, you could look at this in a cycle and go, well, let's talk about your mother and the possibility that perhaps this mother, maybe there was a competitive energy with this. I mean, you know, if you were my client.
Right.
You know, we might be talking about what are these power struggles and why was it so intense for you, and what's the deal with the father, and why was there so much potential guilt or, you know, responsibility or some legacy of inferiority that might have been dropped on you because, I mean, so astrology, because one of my teachers wanted to create a system so that we could use the horoscope to look at childhood issues and
which is
all that stuff.
You have to.
So so that's what's going on with this guy.
Right.
Maybe if we have the right, assuming we have the correct.
Assuming you have the right time.
Yeah, this is
honestly,
what we would say.
Sounds a bit like Donald Trump.
Oh no. So that's interesting. I mean, Donald Trump is a Gemini. His sun is in Gemini. So he has that mercurial, clever thing. But his moon, if you understand his moon, it tells you so much about why he does what he does. His moon is in Sagittarius. Okay, so sun is in Gemini, moon is in Sagittarius. And a Sagittarius moon suggests is driving the persona with a need to express its righteous opinion, to be of influence, and to be respected for what they have to say.
Interesting.
It's so important to anybody with a moon in Sagittarius.
Right.
That they be respected for their opinion and be considered as someone of influence.
Interesting. Very interesting. Oh, that totally checks out. Totally on brand.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I was wondering, you know, this need for the United States in general. What does the United States, from its chart, imperfect as it might be, because we don't necessarily agree on the time, et cetera, but like, what would be said of our country as a whole?
First of all, I'll say that anybody who gets into office or has a prominent place in our national like collective thought has planets in their horoscope that directly connect with planets in the horoscope of the United States.
And I was wondering about that.
I know.
How does that work? I mean, it's like, how?
So, for example, all right, so the United States is a Cancer nation. So here it is with all this loving, emotional energy, nurturing, home, family. That's what it's here to do.
Very emotional.
Give us, you're tired, you're poor. I mean, we're here for you. We're like mama and apple pie. This is it. It's home on the range. Here we are.
Right.
The range, the big open plain would be our Sagittarius ascendant, which everything is big and expansive. It's great, and everything is a cheeseburger deluxe. Everything is supersized. I mean, the United States is big.
In every sense. So the United States also has a Sagittarius moon?
No, the United States, let me get to that. So the United States, the moon is in Aquarius.
Okay.
Everybody knows the age of the Aquarius, harmony and understanding. It's like everyone is equal, peace, loving, granola. We embrace everybody. We embrace a moon in Sagittarius needs to be appreciated for its unique social significance within a group. So that's our melting pot, right? We are everybody is equal here. That's the theory. That's the need. This need in the unfortunately the moon in the United States chart is not as well supported as it could be. So it has issues trying to get fulfillment for this notion of equality because it has to compete. Now, we have this thing called the American dream, right?
Right.
The American dream is a statement that we see in the United States horoscope. Why do I say this? Okay. Neptune has been imbued with the symbolism of dreams and vision and fairy tales and fantasies. And in mundane astrology and in the headlines, if Neptune is really hot in any particular period, I anticipate that we're going to have stories of scandals and lies and deception and drugs and oceans and oil. See, in the language of astrology, everything on the planet has been assigned an association with some, they call it rulership. That's the technical term. So, for example, the beef industry, bulls, cows, that's ruled by Taurus. Taurus, the bull. Okay, there's an association with that. Okay, so the United States there's Neptune in the horoscope, and it's in a very tense relationship with another planet, the planet Mars, which symbolizes action and aggression and war and courage and soldiers and cars. So Mars, all of that, hero, fabulous, in a tense aspect. It's not an easy connection. So one of the potentials of that connection, if it were in a person's chart, we would see the potential for fanaticism or idealism about things that are represented by Mars, like war, soldiers. We glorify them. That's really important, right? Or the energy, our cars. Hollywood is a big, it makes sense that the United States became known for the film industry because that's fantasy, it's ideals, it's a dream factory. So we see this strong statement in the United States horoscope that if it were a person, that person would need to have some pretty strong convictions that might be pushing some boundaries they would idealize something. So we have the American dream. Now, Donald Trump's Sagittarius moon and Gemini sun connect with the part of the U.S. horoscope that symbolizes this American dream.
Mm-hmm.
He can plug into it. Mm-hmm. And part of the and Barack Obama has his Mars connected to that. Barack Obama has a planet in his horoscope that's connected to that as well. And so, what is his big, hope?
Right.
Okay. And so the American people responded to him strongly, and you see that there is a personal connection. So again, now in your own personal life, you could go to your astrologer and go, I'm having trouble with my partner or my child. I don't understand why, we have this tension. We're not really being able to get along here. And then I would look at the horoscope and I would see how things were like crashing into each other, or why when somebody would walk into the room, somebody might respond and feel, God, that person is so irritating. They just walked into the room. Or every time I make an offer, they block me. And I would look in that horoscope and I would see the planetary symbolism that, yeah, there is that potential that that person's going to block your energy. How can we get it so that person becomes a supportive structure, which is the same way of expressing that energy that's blocked?
Right.
A block can become a structure because you have building blocks, right? You can build things on them, right, or it can really ruin your parade.
Right.
So you get to choose and decide, how would you like to apply this potential connection between two people or entities? And here's the kicker. Here is the kicker about astrology. This also applies to the horoscopes of dead people. So if you are really one of your childhood heroes, or a movie star that you idolize, or an author, somebody that you really feel a profound connection to, there will likely to be a connection in that person's horoscope who's no longer among the living and your horoscope. And people who make news, because you have to getting back to the news thing.
Oh, yeah.
People who, and I realize this by recognizing what's going on when a dead person is suddenly all over the news.
Interesting.
And you look at their horoscope. And if that person were alive and coming to you as a client saying, well, what's going on? Let's plan a strategy for the year ahead. I might say, well, Elvis Presley, looks like you're going to be, you look pretty hot. And then like somebody's going to come in there and idealize your life and maybe reveals, what happened in the Elvis movie that just came out this summer, that really focused on how he was exploited and victimized and his issues with drugs as a coping strategy. And he has a pattern in his horoscope that accentuates that being brought to life.
Sure. Oh, that makes perfect sense.
But it's mind-blowing when I first really started to see that, because I've been doing this for a dozen years, right? But
right.
And the first time you come across this happening, you don't know it's just amazing that, yes, this horoscope is functioning and responding in life as if it were a living person.
Well, but that makes sense, actually, because the position of the stars is the position of the stars. It's going to still remain with that person.
Yeah, but what's the position of the stars?
Well, it's what they were.
I know, but what is it? What are we really looking at when we're looking at a horoscope? It's a piece of paper, right? The horoscope is a piece of paper with charts.
A map of the sky.
It's a map of the sky, but it's like I can tell you how it works. I can tell you how it works.
Right.
But I'm not sure I know why it works. And there's something we just do not know. We do not. It's this like sacred geometry. I don't know where it's coming from.
Yeah.
It's humbling and awesome.
I know. I know. And so how did you get into this in the first place?
Into what, astrology or the news?
No, well, let's start with astrology.
So astrology, I read Linda Goodman's Sun Signs when I was 9 years old, and it just made perfect sense.
Right.
And when I was 18, I did as much research as I could on my own. This is long before the internet or anything. I met a professional astrologer in Newport, Rhode Island when I was 18, and that was my first consultation with an astrologer, and I learned about my Gemini moon, and I had a Capricorn ascendant, and that was really, and it started to make sense. Oh my gosh, parts of me that didn't grok with, I'm supposed to be this Aries. I know that what that means, but no, Moon in Gemini, I need to talk and I need to tell everybody what the story is. That's not so much Aries. So I started to understand parts of myself that didn't fit just the sun sign. And I went to Wellesley College. We didn't have an astrology department. Nobody was going to be taking that seriously. They have been some of my harshest skeptical, trolls, frankly. But that's changing, thank God. But you get a degree from a college, and people are like, "You're doing what?" We had telescopes, we had little observatories. So I took astronomy at Wellesley. And then, I just kept reading. I could never give it up. I did everybody's charts that I could. And when we got to the point where I could get a computer with software program, I had to have one. Even though I was working in the entertainment industry, I was in LA, I was doing totally different track, but I never stopped doing horoscopes. It's a calling, right? I'm sure you in your life, why you've evolved to what you did. You just have to do it.
Well, and with astrology, you can do a chart for anything.
Yeah.
And that would be addictive in a way,
Yeah. But I didn't realize that in the beginning, because I said you go through this process. You're looking at your horoscope, and then you're looking at friends and family, and then maybe you go look at an actress or some famous person, and then you start to realize that astrology applies to every moment in time. It applies to a wedding. It applies to a birthday party. It applies to signing a contract.
Sure.
It's a timestamp like DNA, and you can progress it forward and see how it's likely to evolve. Just like DNA, if you know the DNA, you can see the potential for how that, whatever that is, the living creature is going to develop.
Right. Okay, just like when we're like kind of current events type of thing.
Okay.
Liz Truss.
Yes.
Liz Truss. Did you see that coming?
So Liz Truss, we don't have a time for her horoscope. We don't know a birth time for her. So Liz Truss, yes, looking at her horoscope, it was like, well, she thinks she's going to go in here and take some risks. Good luck with that. And I thought that by January, she had a pattern that looked like a serious reality check, and circumstances conspired to push her out even actually, it's amazing. This eclipse, I'm looking at her horoscope now on the screen. We can see how she was pushed into the public eye because she was eclipsed. She was eclipsed. There's a part of her horoscope, what we know, that was eclipsed in last November and May that was activated in mid-August. And so all of a sudden, she's the hot new thing. You can see that she's going to make this dramatic connection with the public. And then we also see that she is eclipsed again on Tuesday. And we also see that, it's so interesting because many of the people that are making news now that evoke this tension between the old guard and the avant-garde. So she's the avant-garde because she's a woman, right? Great. Right. And she's willing to send it, but she's the old guard because she's trying to roll back the clock in terms of economic growth and development with these old school policies. She ends up, what we could see was the potential disruption because her actions were likely to be so reckless, which is exactly what happened. And then she was eclipsed. Her horoscope was eclipsed. Her Leo sun was eclipsed on Tuesday. And by that time, somebody else had moved in. We might have been able to get more of to pinpoint her exit. I thought that by January, things were going to be pretty sad. If we had a birth time, we would have had more information to see when this provocation, when her exit would have happened.
Right. Well, and somebody in Liz Truss's position, she's being kind of pushed out to the forefront. And I didn't see there was a heck of a lot I guess she could have just wholesale said, no, I'm not doing this. But, people are asking you to do this. So they're kind of pushing out there. You kind of do it, right? And I don't know if there's anything else that she could have done. I mean, her policies were disastrous. Right.
Yeah, they were disastrous. But what she was able to do, she didn't have to.
That's true. Yeah.
But what she was able to do was, I'm looking at her horoscope and I'm going, she had the power of persuasion this year.
Right.
So she was able to convince people to give her a shot. They didn't have to. Maybe if they'd gone to the nearest astrologer, the astrologer would have said, this woman, she's a bit risk prone right now and a little reckless. Yeah. Maybe you don't want to rally behind her. Maybe you don't want to elevate her to this position.
Right.
But I don't think that's what happened in her party. I don't think anybody.
It's like I see her as kind of hapless. Yeah, she had these policies that were just kind of insane, but everybody's like, yeah. This is great. But I don't know. It was just such a train wreck.
It was a train wreck, and you knew it was a train wreck when it's terrible. She met the Queen, and that was it. But it was like the Queen was like, I can't be here to witness this anymore. And then she goes to the funeral, and the Australian commentators are going, now who is this woman? Who is this person who's just gotten out of the car? It's like the next prime minister of the country, and the people in Australia, the TV commentators are like, I don't know who that is. I really don't know who it is.
It's a head of lettuce.
It's a head. I know a head of lettuce outlasted her. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. I know.
This is what you were saying about, did she have any choice? Did she have to go down this path? Was there no other way? Did it have to be this woman? It's a really interesting question that astrologers debate. Fate versus free will. Because I can consult with a client and I might, astrology can help you when you understand certain patterns. It can help you temper your responses. You always have in your reactions, you always have control over how you respond to an upset or anything, right? You have control of that.
Right.
It's an interesting question. How much you can step off the train of destiny. There's this book I read in high school. For some reason, my teachers thought high schoolers needed to be reading about existentialism and Jean-Paul Sartre and all this stuff. Nice. And so we read it in French, and it was called Les Jeux sont faits. The die is cast.
Yeah, by Sartre.
By Sartre, yes. And it was about a pair of lovers, these lovers who, they were the soulmates, and it was the most amazing thing. And then a series of unfortunate events happened so that like one of them died or whatever. And this was a big tragedy, and it's terrible. And by some magical divine intervention, they were given the opportunity to try again. Wow. And so you're reading the story and you're like, okay, what are they going to do? What are they going to do? And they did the same thing.
Okay, interesting.
So it's a very good question, because I'm here working with my clients saying, you have a choice. What would you like to do? Are you going to stick your neck out? Are you going to are you going to enter the garden, apply for that scholarship? It's your choice. And I have been influenced. Actually, you can do that. Like, for example, when I first started writing and getting published as a writer, there was a period in my horoscope. I was in a phase of development where I knew that any writing opportunity that came my way was likely to go somewhere. And that if I were smart and wanted to take that, brass ring I needed to do it. And so there was an offer. Somebody asked me to write something. I had never been published before. I was, I decided I was going to do this article because I kind of knew that if I did, I probably wasn't going to fail. And that article was published once and then published again and then presented, in Japan. It got me a trip to Japan.
That's fantastic.
Okay. So I used my understanding of the potential in my horoscope to do something. And so I did have that choice. Maybe I wouldn't have done it if I hadn't had that boost of confidence that knowing where I was in the cycle of development. Is it time to plant or is it time to harvest? Is it, people plant by the moon. Is now a good time to put a tree in the soil? You're not going to do it in December. Why would you do that? Right. So astrology is trying to help you understand timing.
Love that. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
I said I could talk about this forever and ever.
For all day. I know you could. And I'm getting all like, and I'm sitting and looking at you and you're like, you're calm and just like, and I'm getting all excited because that's what I do.
It's exciting. I tell you, I think if I were in the world that you are in, I would be like hair on fire. This is so cool. And I think it is awesome that you can look at the sky and see what's going on in world events. And of course, it says on your website, you've got a unique beat.
Unique beat. I am a reporter with a unique beat. Exactly.
The world. And you deliver weekly forecasts. And
I deliver weekly forecasts, and I do a lot of things. I give a lot to the world. So my weekly forecast, you can sign up. I don't have a paywall. I have a tip jar, but I don't have a paywall. I have podcasts that I do. There's the one that I mentioned before, Off the Charts, with astrologer, actual real life journalist Whitney Fishburne. We put that out every other Friday. And what we'll do is we'll break down the news because some people like to hear it instead of read it, right? So, and then we talk about other things and we sing and we laugh, do other things. And then I've also been doing a little video thing with another colleague of mine, Allison Wu, and I've been doing the weather forecast, WHETHER, which is the little video about 5 to 8 minutes about if you want to see your astrology on TV, here it is. And oh, by the way, here are the headlines that reflect what I said was going to happen last week. Here it is. Here's the front page of the New York Times, and see how this headline and how this image that they picked yesterday with no awareness of planetary patterns is a perfect reflection of what we see going on. How did they do that?
Are you familiar with Revealing Light Tarot out of her woman named Marianne in Australia? She does a bit of astrology. She's mostly on tarot, and she pulls in the astrology of all of these world events, and she'll look at, will Clarence Thomas be impeached, and she'll do a tarot spread on it. Will Donald Trump be subpoenaed, and she'll do the tarot, and she'll look at the astrology of it. Just all of this stuff is really interesting, and you just go, wow, this was kind of scripted in a way. It's fascinating.
It is. And so that's another coping strategy for crazy times. Okay.
True.
If there really is some plan up there, if there really is, if this is all in some divine order, that there is an astrologic, the word disaster, you know what a disaster is?
No.
That word itself means torn from the stars.
That makes sense.
Okay. So it's a disaster when it is out of alignment. Okay, so if you think, all right, it's so crazy in the United States right now. What is happening? Things are breaking down. We're turning into a big compost heap before my eyes. I have no idea what's happening. Okay, there is order in this seemingly random chaos.
Sure.
You want compost to break down. You want the trash to rot and go back into the earth, into something else, right? So if this is part of what's on our calendar with the energy of the planet Pluto, we're having a Pluto return, which is big composting and power, then you want the things that are rotten to break down. So that they can, and then you have to trust that the cycle will come again, spring will come again, and there will be time to plant seeds and grow something that hopefully doesn't have the old cycle. Right. That's a coping strategy.
And so that begs a question. Is the smoke clearing for us anytime soon? It will clear. It will clear. No, I think collectively. So, all right. So I'll share this bit. So is it clearing anytime soon? Where the planets are at right now, because again, we've given them meaning. Between now, 2022, 2023, really around 2024, right now, the outer planets that move really slowly, and we see their quote unquote influence. I hate to use the word influence because I like free will, right? But that's, people understand what that word influence. Okay, it's affecting events. Right.
These 4 outer planets are going to be at the end of their respective signs. It's a very interesting time to have 4 really slow moving planets at the very end of Capricorn, Pisces, Taurus. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So when all of these big, heavy planets are at the end, it's because they're wrapping things up.
Okay.
But what comes next? The beginning. So there is a beginning. There's always a beginning. That's what you have to remember. There is a beginning. It's a cycle. Spring is coming. There is a new moon. The moon is not going to fall out of the sky. Hopefully it won't. It could, but the sun is going to rise. There's always a beginning.
Right.
But you have to go through this ending so that you can clear a path to do the new thing. And hopefully people can get excited about that.
Right.
And make good choices and respond to the changes with some, okay, all right, I see that. Yeah, okay, that thing isn't going to be here anymore. Okay, all right. Yeah, I used to listen to my music on cassette players.
Right.
Okay, I don't need a CD player anymore. All right, okay, I got it.
Yeah. That's very good advice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So 2024, 2025, we start.
2024, 2025, 2026, we have because these planets move so slowly, what happens is they sort of inch forward and then they go retrograde, right? People like, oh, Mercury's retrograde, we're going to die. No, you're not going to die. Yeah. It's this, again, as above, so below, from our perspective on Earth. The planet appears to be moving backwards in the sky. It's not, but it appears to be. So astrologers go, well, that must mean that all the stuff associated with that thing is going for a review. Right. So it moves. So it's a slow process. So it's going to take, we got a few years to go. But, it's going to something new. And the log jam that we've been in for such a long time, this tension, okay, of like, good Lord, I mean, can something just move forward? Why is everything 50-50 all the time? Why is everything so razor thin? Well, that's a reflection of what's going on, the way astrologers interpret the patterns.
Right.
And they will move on.
And they will move. On our time, not necessarily.
Right.
So, right. Okay, so you've got this great website, ElisabethGrace.com, and that's Elizabeth with an
S. Elizabeth with an S, not a Z. Elisabeth Grace with an S, who is not the steamy romance novelist who lives in Canada. I am the astrologer with an S.
Ha 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 ha. And you got the forecast and your services and your page to support what you do, which is awesome what you do. Your podcasts and everything. This is really great stuff. So we'll put this website in the show notes, of course, to direct listeners there. But I'd love to have you back.
I'd love to come back. This was so much fun.
I
really enjoyed it. I thank you so much for inviting me to speak to you.
Thank you to Anthony Pico.
Thank you to Anthony Pico. He's awesome.
He is awesome.
I know he's awesome.
He'll do this again.
Okay.
All right. Until then, thank you so much for everything. Thank you for joining me and bearing with my crazy brain today.
It was in the chart. It was in the chart. We were going to be, out there a little bit.
And you were so nerdy about it. You'd made a chart for today. I love that.
I did, of course. Yes. Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Radiate Wellness is an international community of holistic and alternative healers dedicated to helping you create spiritual, energetic, and physical well-being. To learn more about our practitioners, services, classes, and events, or to schedule an appointment, visit us at radiatewellnesscommunity.com.